All right, James. This is for a good friend of mine, Arkham reporter, Damien.
Hey, man.
Uh, he wants to have you elaborate on what you had written in that article on basically not letting them, aka your employer or even maybe other people in your life. How do you not let them get your best hours? How do you keep up your creative productivity while you're working full time and you're trying to fulfill your social obligations? How do you what advice do you have for that? Like elaborate on it a little more or give what you think.
I can briefly outline my writing periods when I was working full time and doing my best work. So I'm starting a family, trying to buy a house, keeping a wife in a car. I didn't do any writing. I did a lot of reading. I used that period of my life to read a whole lot. Then when I got injured, uh, well, when that business had a downturn and I had to go back from working like 70 hours a week to 40 hours a week, I uh, I was able to write a book over the course of a couple of years, and then I had another super high productivity, high commitment time of employment, another 10 years, and then I got injured. And I wrote one book on weekends. Uh, well, I used to have Wednesday night off and Saturday night off. So 2 nights a week, I wrote 2 hours a night. 2 years, I got a book written. It wouldn't have been enough for me to keep up with some kind of commitment like what you have. But when I got injured, I wrote my first three self-defense and combat books when I was hurt, and uh, it took uh, it took me 2 years to write the first one, but then the next two I got done in 6 weeks apiece because I kind of learned the format. Uh, then when I went back to just working full time, I managed to write 4 books. I didn't publish them. I just wrote them. Uh, then I had to stop writing for 4 years because I had a management job. I had to have all my wits about me, managing all these criminals and working for millionaire psycho bitches. The So when I decided to write full time, I took 3 months off. I rewrote the 4 books I had written when I was working full time because I found out there were a lot of mistakes that I needed to fix because I wrote them when I was tired and I was depleted. Then I wrote another book and another book. Okay, so I rewrote 4, I wrote 2 in just a few months. Then I went back to work and I went back to work part time. And I made sure I was doing a type of work that I trained hundreds of people on. Type of work that most people can't do because they're lazy, but once you learned how to do it, it didn't require any intellectual or emotional investment. So my first 130 books that I wrote and published between 2011 and 2016, I think it was 134 books. I wrote them in my mind while I was stocking shelves, for the most part, and it was pretty simple. I had finally, at that point in my life, figured out how to reserve my best for my work. So a couple of tips: if you're a young guy and you've got to work between 36 and 48 hours a week, anything more than 48 hours a week, you're a slave. You're not going to be able to be an effective writer unless you put yourself in extreme sleep deprivation. And that worked good for me with a horror. I'd write my horror on the back end after I've been up for a couple of days. Um, when I was working part time, I would do a lot of my writing when I was fresh, and then I would do the horror when I was all exhausted and everything to help with the surreal aspect. So number one, drink before you go to work. Okay, now you don't want to you don't want to be drunk or have a buzz when you go to work, but you don't want to wake up, you don't want to work all week and then get drunk on your first night off and then wake up with a hangover and that cuts into your writing time. What you want to do is, if you need to get a buzz or get drunk, do it before you take your nap, before you go to work. That's what I did. During my peak productivity, 3 nights a week, I used alcohol to just knock myself out very quickly because I'd be drinking coffee all day long. And then I'd have a few hours left before I had to wake up and go to work. So I'd knock back like 4 shots and a beer really quick, get a little bit drunk, pass out, and then as soon as I sobered up, I would wake up and I'd go to work. So my employer got to enjoy my hangover. I didn't need to break any world records. I was a part-time, guy. I wasn't the main guy. That's one thing. The other thing would be don't eat at work. And don't eat before you go to work. There's no reason to fuel yourself up for work. I like starving at work. I mean, this is generally what I did through my whole, I always disliked eating at work or before work. What I would like to do is come home and then fuel myself up either by eating either from my training or from my writing. So just prioritize everything quality-wise for your work, not for the work that you're doing so you can keep a roof over your head. You just want to do enough at that job to keep it, and the more physical the job is, the better. I would not use any stimulants to get your job done, including coffee. Use your coffee to wake yourself up when you get home. So think of your creative output as your work, and your work is your play. And anytime you're not doing something dangerous, and this is one reason why I veered away from working in the trades, even though that was something that was recommended to me when I was young, and I've enjoyed doing some of that kind of work after my retirement from retail food. I went into something that was regarded as unskilled labor, even though there were cataloging skills involved. Just because I didn't want to be writing something in my head and daydreaming and then getting crushed by a steel beam. That would have been counterproductive. So something that's mildly dangerous, if you're working on that, if it's not heavy equipment that you're working with, then you can work on your creative content there. Or maybe this thing here where we are answering questions off the channel, I would practice answering